I have to call people. What if they answer? And I said, okay, let's look at it this way. Twist your mindset. If you know you have the skills to help somebody and you choose not to call them, you are by default harming that person.
You have found Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. Downloadable audio episodes can be found in the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. We are locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie. Today, we're welcoming / preparing to learn from Derek Dombeck, the founder of Generations of Wealth Global. And today we're chatting real estate, which is I think almost everyone knows you can make a couple bucks with. So, Derek, how is it going today?
It's going really well, James, and you can make a couple bucks. You can also lose a couple bucks if you do it wrong. So,
It's
no
funny you
doubt.
say that because I just had someone on the show a few weeks ago who lost quite a few dollars. It was just interesting to get the whole not every project or house or apartment building is a piggyback that you can just break into and take the cash.
That is a fact. In fact, the majority of them are not.
All
Uh,
right.
we've got plenty of failures and the t-shirts to go along with them. So,
Nice. You get a t-shirt.
oh yeah, never want to wear that one again. Nope, nope.
Well, tell us, what is Generations of Wealth? Let's start there.
Well, so Generations of Wealth at this point, it's a platform after 20 years in the real estate industry, investing in real estate here in central Wisconsin, throughout the state of Wisconsin. Um, we learned a lot of stuff the hard way, and now we're passing on our experience, our knowledge to the next generation and all generations. And so Generations of Wealth is just my platform. I've got a show out there as well, and but it's really, our tagline is live your vision, love your life. And
Hmm.
what we've seen and lived ourselves is entrepreneurs in general are either workaholics or just bad decision makers when it comes to potentially, thinking about their health, their life, their time with their family, everything else. We all want to go out there and build some monster business without necessarily having any end vision for it. And so we believe, again, after making all the mistakes, we want to have a vision figured out for our personal lives, living our personal lives the way we want, and then build our business to support our personal lives, instead of what most entrepreneurs do is just work 70, 80 hours a week, 7 days a week, with the illusion that someday they'll get to enjoy the fruits of their labor. But someday doesn't always come.
No, just keep spinning that wheel, right?
Yeah. And so, through our journey, we've figured out that we can live our lives. We can have our cake and eat it too, but we've got to have a plan written out. It's got to be something, and it's ever changing and should be, which is a written vision. Um, and that's the short version of what Generations of Wealth is all about.
Fair. So is the idea that you help investors get into the real estate game, broadly speaking, so they come
Uh,
in green? Or
no,
is this
not
more experienced investors?
it doesn't really matter when it comes to figuring out a vision. Like, everybody should do that anyways. But for us, we started in 2003. I'll just give you the short version. We started in 2003. My wife Tracy and I, we were buying cash flowing properties in Wisconsin, but we also got involved with a couple organizations in Florida. So we were building new houses in Florida, and everything was going very well. We were using bank financing for everything because we had good jobs, we had good credit. Banks were fighting over our business, and we didn't know any different. And then 2007 hit, and we had built up about a $4 million portfolio, and it went down to 1 million within 6 months on paper. And
Wow.
ultimately, we lost pretty much everything. And that was a shift in our mindset, because we were no longer bankable. We couldn't, I couldn't borrow a nickel from a bank at that point.
So
So it
is
was
the idea
either
that you were that far leveraged?
that was the interesting part. Because of the times back then, we weren't over leveraged when we did the deals.
Okay.
But when the markets crashed and the banking industry went under, then absolutely we were over leveraged.
So is
And
the idea, I imagine, just from a from a dollars and cents point of view, were these 5-year balloons that were just amortized over 20 or 30 years? So when their value dropped and you went to refinance, it
Some
was a
of
bad day, or how did that work?
there was a whole different array. So all of our properties in Wisconsin, which were bought based off of cash flow, were completely fine. It
Okay.
was the new construction projects in Florida. They were built with the idea of breaking even or making a small cash flow. And the idea was that they would appreciate, and they did appreciate, except they also depreciated. And when you buy assets that don't cash flow, in my humble opinion, after living it, you are putting yourself at risk.
Fair.
And so for us, even to this day, I have passed up literally hundreds of deals that I could have done and probably would have turned out just fine, especially the last 5 years as the market just climbed and climbed and climbed. But the reality is, I don't buy unless I can cash flow at this point. I've been there, done that. I won't take the risk, and it's not worth what we went through.
That's
Um,
fair because you're moving from a speculation game
it's
to
speculation.
I can clearly see the money coming in, the money going out kind of thing, and it's much
And
less speculation.
and speculation and appreciation doesn't pay your bills or keep your family fed. It looks beautiful on a spreadsheet
Sure.
and a balance sheet until things go the other way.
Right.
And the other thing that we learned is, and I'm not anti-bank by any means, but by using banks, especially if they have call provisions or 3, 5, 7 year balloons, you are not in control of your business. And so many people that bought apartment complexes as one asset class, that bought at really low cap rates, they're in trouble right now. And many of those people also went and raised private money in a syndication to get the 20 or 30% upfront that they needed, and then had the bank finance the lion's share of the deal. Well, the people they raised money from are in a heap of trouble right now as well on a lot of those deals. So I just, like I said, to me, it's not all about money. It's about keeping what we worked for and being safe.
So tell me, so they're losing money or they're having a bad day? Tell me, help me understand that.
Okay, well, let's just say that somebody bought $1 million apartment complex and the bank is going to fund 700,000 of it, and they're going to raise 300,000 of it from a syndication. Now that's likely on maybe a 5 year transaction with the bank. Now the bank says, okay, your loan is due. We're going to rewrite it, but interest rates are 2 or 3 or 4% higher than what it was when you
Oh,
bought.
gotcha. Okay.
So
Just big interest rate.
the valuation isn't there. So the bank's going to say the only way we'll rewrite it is you have to bring cash to the table. Well, if they don't have the cash, right, they get wiped out. They'll get foreclosed, and thereby that syndication of investors will get foreclosed as well. So now that property owner has to go back to their syndication and say, okay, we're having a cash call. We have to raise another $100,000-$200,000, or we're going to lose this all. And they can't sell the property because based on today's cap rates and today's interest rates, it won't sell for as much as they leveraged it. They are over leveraged.
Got it. Okay.
So,
Interesting. I wanted clarity on that because I see apartment buildings going up left and right everywhere I go. Your neck of the woods in,
mhm.
I guess, where did you say you're out of
I'm
Wausau?
near Wassa.
Okay.
So,
And I'm just outside of Madison, Wisconsin. Apartments are popping up like, I don't know, dandelion seeds. They're
yeah.
just everywhere.
Well, and
Huge ones.
you're talking about new construction apartments,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. And you know, a lot of those people are, and I don't know that business. I don't buy and sell apartments as much as I do residential, single family, and small multis, but a lot of those people are either trying to keep their crews working, or it takes a long time to put together some of these transactions. They may have bought that piece of land a year or 2 years ago, and they had all these commitments. So they're hoping and praying, which is two very bad things that you should do as an investor, is hope and pray.
Mm-hmm.
They're hoping and praying that interest rates come down or rents will increase, but rents have stabilized now, and in some cases they're starting to decline just a little bit, not a lot. But I mean, there is still pockets where there is definitely demand. I mean, Madison is one example. Madison, Wisconsin, there's still high demand, and
Oh
until
yeah.
it catches up, but as a region across the state or the Midwest, and nationwide, a lot of these apartments are underwater.
Mm, interesting. So
Mhm.
tell me, repeat for me again the property types that you invest in. I remember you mentioned single family and then small multifamily.
Yeah, so traditionally I've been involved in mostly single family, but I do dabble a little bit in I've got a couple quarries. We've got uh, a 12 unit building that we lease out the per bedroom, so it's more like a boarding house. I get involved in joint ventures with other people, so sometimes I'm helping negotiate storage unit purchases, contracting businesses, RV parks and resorts is something, an asset class I'm interested in. So it just, you never know what's going to happen when the phone rings, James.
That's fair. That's totally fair. Tell me, let's just take those one by one here. Let's start with single family. Is this
Mhm.
something that you're buying and flipping, buying fix and flip, or buy and rent?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay. All
It's
right.
very case by case. So primarily, if I'm going to buy something with cash, then I'm going to usually fix it and resell it. If I'm buying something where either the seller is financing it with me or I'm bringing in private capital and doing a longer term hold, I like to hold those not as straight rentals. I like to lease them and give the tenant an option to purchase them.
Oh,
And
okay.
so that I like that model. And and sometimes I just did a transaction here recently where the seller is taking payments from me, and then I turn around and resold to people I know, and I'm taking payments from them. I'm kind of doing a wraparound scenario, and that I make a spread on the interest. So
Nice.
so it
So,
just does depend.
so is that set up with that specific transaction? Is that land contract with the seller?
No, I typically want a promissory note and a mortgage
Okay.
that I pledge to the seller, and then I get the same thing on the back end. But
Gotcha.
but I disclose everything to the sellers. It's completely all above board as far as they need to know, and I'm very passionate about first of all negotiating the right way, not taking advantage of people's bad situations, and working to solve their problem, their real estate problem. I can't solve all their problems, but I can help solve their real estate problems. So the story goes, I bought these three properties from a guy named Tony, and Tony has not made a dime in the 7 years he's owned these properties. The properties were located in three different cities, two in Wisconsin, one in Upper Michigan. But he had a management company that was just raking him over the coals. So literally in the 7 years he's owned them, he's either been spending money to fix them or they're having bad tenants and loss of rents. So he's never cash flowed. And but he was very stuck on his purchase price or his sales price, I should say. So I make offers in multiple different ways. And if I'm going to buy something for cash, that's a lower offer. If I'm going to be able to make payments over time, I can increase my offer. In this particular case, uh, Tony didn't want the chunks of money. He just wanted to stop the bleeding and he wanted to stop the stress. So we structured a deal where I'm making payments to him over the next 10 years, and the all three of the properties needed work. So I gave him full as is value for his properties, but I didn't want to keep them. And I told him that. So I just, called friends of mine that I know in each of those areas that want to hold long-term rentals. They have the time and energy to go in and fix these up, and they're going to, cash flow them long term. So we make a spread between what I'm paying Tony and what my people are paying me on a monthly basis, and just carrying the paper, as they say.
Nice. All right. Well, that doesn't sound terrible. Tony's happy. Your people are happy. You're happy.
Yeah. Well,
Everybody's happy.
and
Yeah.
and the best part about that, James, is what I'm really doing with Tony, and he's well aware because we've had this conversation. He's actually done a testimonial video for me stating this. But once he's paid off, then I raise private capital from people all the time. And right now, Tony's getting 0% interest. That's our agreement. He's taking 0%. However, once I pay him in full, he wants to keep his money still working. Now he becomes a private investor of mine, and I pay my private investors anywhere from 6 to 10%, depending on the deal.
All right.
So he's very happy, but he gets to know me first, right? We build a relationship. He knows I do what I say I'm going to do, and then over time he becomes an investor, and that's beneficial for both of us.
Sure.
And he's secured by the property with a promissory note and mortgage while it's being improved in value. So his security actually gets better every day as the property gets fixed up and renovated.
Got it. Very cool. So
Mhm.
during all of this, who is technically the owner as this keeps going? Is it you or is it the other people on your side?
Well, if we got really deep into this, I bought the property titled in a trust, and the trust is still the owner. I sold the trust to my end buyer. So my end buyer is in control, but everything is secured using mortgages. So
Got it.
if they don't pay me, I'm still going to pay Tony. I'm
All
going to
right.
go after them,
Got it.
right?
Okay.
But ultimately, they are the owners of that trust that owns the property.
All right. It's just keeping track of all of the shells, right?
It's a little bit of a shell game. It sounds way more than it is. I mean, it's yeah, you got to have a decent bookkeeper.
Yeah. That's
I
fair.
happen to live with mine, so it's a little beneficial,
Oh, there you
and
go.
I'm married to her. So
Tell me about small multifamily.
the small multis are really, when you're talking, duplex, triplex, fourplex type of stuff. We've had that off and on for years. It's not my favorite asset class because most of those are a little older, especially the up and down duplexes. You're dealing with a lot of noise complaints and smells and all these different things. So that was really early on in my career. Now I do have several that I like. I have a side by side that I picked up this last year, and that was another kind of an interesting transaction where the seller was an 83-year-old woman. She lost her husband, so she's widowed. Then her son was helping her with maintenance. Then she lost her son,
Oh,
and the properties just went into disrepair. But again, she didn't want the chunk of money. She wants the monthly revenue, the cash flow. And so I know for a fact, because these guys approached me afterwards, two other local house flipper landlords offered her more money than I offered her in the previous 6 months prior to me even meeting her, and she turned them down. And here's the challenge, James, is most people think that money is the sole decision when there's somebody trying to sell a piece of real estate. And in this case, it wasn't. It was the monthly cash flow, not the chunk. She has actually some serious tax consequences if she sells for a chunk because
yeah.
of capital gains and all of that stuff. So in structuring an installment sale, she was putting in her pocket with my deal the same money that she's been putting in her pocket for years without the joys of management and not having to stick $50,000 into the property because that's what it needed, right?
All right.
So that's what I do, is I really get down to what does that person need? It's not about, like, internally I know if I'm going to do the deal or not. I know what profit margins I want to hit, but so many of my competition, I guess we'll say, in air quotes, is looking at it only from their side, and they think that they need to win the negotiation, meaning they have to take advantage.
Hmm.
And to me, um, nobody wins if there's one side that has buyer's remorse or seller's remorse. We really have to work this through together. And that's what I did. I made her three different offers. Certainly there was a cash offer, and then there was a couple different types of terms offers, and they each had different interest rates to them. They each had different timelines to them, and she chose the one she liked.
All right.
And so now it hopefully it doesn't happen, but if she passes away during the term of our payments to her, it doesn't stop the payments. They just go to her estate.
Okay.
So she was, happy about that.
So in this particular instance, is she still living in the property?
These were investment properties of hers.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Got it. All right. And how do you end up finding things like this, places like this? Because I imagine she didn't talk to a real estate agent and say, "Hey, slap a sign in the front yard,
You,
putting this
you
for sale."
know, I gotta tell you that um, I would never disclose her name, but she is a licensed real estate broker for over 30 years in the state of
Oh,
Wisconsin, and chose not to put it on the MLS because honestly, she was embarrassed. And
okay.
she was embarrassed. She knows we had this discussion. She could have sold that property for way more money than what I gave her.
Okay.
But again, it wasn't about the chunk. It was about the longevity. And so, yeah, she very much knows the business, has been in the business for years, and still chose to do it this way. And how I find them, like anything, if you're reputable and you do good business, people talk. If you're not reputable and you do bad business, people talk.
Fair.
So I get referrals. I do a fair amount of direct to seller marketing, mail campaigns, social media campaigns, things like that. But it's really just take care of people and do the right thing, and these deals, they appear.
All right. Fair enough. Tell me, you mentioned the tax thing with her specifically, and I imagine taxes in real estate are a whole game. So sometimes it's really why people get into the game.
Mhm.
So when you are working with people through the generations of wealth, can you tell me what you're steering them towards as far as taxes go for depreciation and all that jazz?
I hesitate to talk to anybody about taxes other than give them a broad overview and then suggest they talk to their professional, because we are all in such completely different tax brackets, tax situations. Um, for years, 20 years I've been doing this, and people are like, "Oh, I don't want to flip houses because then I got to pay taxes." Well, you're only paying taxes if you made a profit. And if you don't want to make a profit, you shouldn't flip houses
What are you
anyways, because you're
doing?
not
Yeah,
going to do what it takes. But it's just kind of in my mind, the wrong mentality. I pay my fair share of taxes, and my fair share just, is as low as I can legally have it, right? When I'm discussing with anybody that's going through a sale or having, any challenges with it, instead of me telling them what they should do, I often will just tell them stories about other deals I've done, and, discuss like what happened with that duplex, and then advise them to go talk to their accountant, because, um, like estates, we'll just talk about estates for a second. If I buy an estate, depending on how it was deeded and owned prior and who's the heir, they could get a step up in tax basis. And then they could sell to me capital gains free. Versus if it's an entity and the owner of the entity dies, well, there may or may not be a step up in basis. It depends what happens to the entity. So it's just not black and white. And that's why I hesitate to get too deep into it,
sure.
with anybody.
Fair. How did you end up getting into the real estate game?
I lost a bet, and
Literally?
no, no, I started out really quite young in my early 20s, and not investing, but I had bought a property close to where I grew up, and I renovated it. I have a construction background, so I knew it was possible to, buy something, fix it up, get that equity from sweat equity, right? Build it up myself. And then when I was in my mid 20s, my wife and I were approached by a person that was trying to sell us into a financial services product. And of course, they're also always recruiting. So they were trying to recruit my wife into the financial services industry. And I was that person that was sitting there at the table with my arms crossed, kind of leaning back, and then pretty soon I'm leaning forward, and then my arms were uncrossed, and I was getting a financial education that I had never gotten before.
All
Um,
right.
So they ended up recruiting me, and I started meeting with, husbands and wives typically, and working with them on their financial plan. And part of that was we could write mortgages.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so I was selling life insurance, I was selling mortgages, and I was selling securities. And I don't like securities, still don't to this day, because I'm a control freak and I have no control over them. But again, that 2 years of my life, I didn't really sell a lot, but I learned a lot. And one of the things I learned was I could put the best plan in front of 99% of people in the country, and they would say no because they just don't feel like actually taking those steps to improve their life. But I knew how I could improve mine, and I knew I was passionate about real estate at that point. So, we just 2003, we bought a couple fixer-upper properties here locally, and then we got involved in a couple in Florida, and it just grew and grew and grew until, like I said, '07 it crashed. But um, it, it it was, well, I'm that personality type where I'm ready, fire, aim. So I'll just dive in and learn as I go. Some people, they'll just cringe when I hear that, but that's honestly what we did, and it worked out.
All right. Tell me, let's go back to the 2008 time. How did you end up recovering from that or making it out alive, however you want to put it?
Fortunately, I'd never quit my job. So I was running my business full time. I was working my job full time. My wife was working. So we entered into negotiations with eight, was it eight? Yeah, eight properties that were actively being foreclosed on against us. The properties that were local in Wisconsin, I was dealing with three local community banks, two of which got shut down, but one did okay. So this was my life lesson is learning how to talk to people.
Mm.
And this is one of my biggest pet peeves now, James, is especially in this day and age where everybody's just texting and emailing and nobody has a conversation. I had to learn how to have conversations. So I went to that community bank. I talked to my loan officer and I said, I want to have a meeting with the bank president and can you set that up? And we went and sat in a conference room at the bank. And I said, this is what's happening. This is our plan to get out of it. And we would really appreciate you working with us, because I had commercial loans back then on 3-year balloons.
Oh, wow.
And again, all of our properties in Wisconsin were paying for themselves. They did cash flow. And these banks, I never missed a payment with them. So as I laid out there, I mean, I had papers scattered across that entire conference room table showing them what was going on. And the bank president said to me, he said, nobody does this. Nobody comes and calls a meeting like you've done. Everybody just hides from it.
Mm.
And it was a little aha moment, right? Like, just don't follow the herd, do the opposite. So at that point, it took 3 years. I mean, back then, all these foreclosures were hanging over our heads. We had a lot of stress. But that's when we really started flipping properties because we needed the chunks of money. And we were robbing from Peter to pay Paul for a long time, but eventually we worked through it. And I got to the eighth property out of eight. I had negotiated 7 short sales, and as part of those negotiations, they agreed not to come after us for any deficiencies or any losses that they took. The eighth property, that lender was taken into receivership by the NCUA because it was a credit union, and they would not waive their right to come after me for a deficiency. And in the state of Florida at that time, they could come after you for up to 4 years after the foreclosure was done. Essentially, they wait until you get back on your feet, and then
Oh,
they can come and wipe
sure.
you out again.
Okay.
And I had taken on a new business partner, and I didn't want to jeopardize him. So I was always against filing bankruptcy, and I was the one that signed on a dotted line. I'm responsible. Ultimately, I was forced into bankruptcy anyways. And looking back, I could have filed 3 years sooner and been over it 3 years sooner, but I don't regret our decisions. We did what we had to do, but even in bankruptcy, the only thing that I wiped out was that debt in Florida and a couple of lines of credit that got called on me. But all of our other debts, we reaffirmed all of them. And, I live by that decision today. Like that kept my relationships strong with my local lenders and everything else because they had to sign off on all of this stuff. And
Oh, sure.
I
Okay.
mean, they get named in a bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So, but we reaffirmed all those debts at the risk that once you reaffirm, if it goes bad again, you can't, there's nothing you can do. You can't file again.
You used your get
Um,
out of jail free card kind of thing.
right,
All
right.
right.
So,
Interesting.
but here's the reason that it was the biggest blessing I've ever had in my life. 2007 through 2010, that stressful time in our life, that's how I learned how to do what I do today. This is how I can go and help people today because I didn't just read it in a book, I lived it. And if I sit across the kitchen table from somebody and I say, James, I understand you're going through foreclosure. I understand the feelings that you're having and the emotions you're feeling because I went through it as well. And I'll tell them that story. And I'm truly there to help them. It's a game changer. And so, moving forward, the generations of wealth movement is really that. It's the financial education, certainly of gaining wealth, but it's the, the physical wealth, the time wealth, the emotional wealth, all of those things. Like we business owners, in general, usually run on the ragged edge and we can wear ourselves out pretty quickly. And when you have these challenges come up, not if, when these challenges come up, how you handle them is crucial, right?
That's fair. Totally fair. Tell me, so since 2010, when you're looking for deals, you're still in the real estate game. What are you looking for differently that you wouldn't have either noticed or you didn't consider it an issue before when you're looking at deals?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I only buy on cash flow at this point.
Right.
So I'm looking at deals that many people might say, yeah, this is in Madison, it's going to go up in value. Fair assessment and true in most cases, but not every case. And
Yeah, as
but
far as we know, right?
right, exactly. It's musical chairs, but eventually the music stops. And that's what we're starting to see right now, regionally and across the country, not necessarily in Madison specific, but the music has stopped to a certain degree. I have people in my network that are in new construction. I mean, they are having to cut their prices on their spec homes by $100,000 to $200,000 on the West Coast to get rid of them.
Wow.
East Coast, it's well, you think about the longevity or the life cycle of building new construction. By the time you start with a lot, you go through the permitting phase, you get the property built, and then on the market, it's not uncommon to be, a year. And so a lot of these people, when they started the project, the numbers made sense. Interest rates were low enough. Now they're trying to sell something and it's going to cost a homeowner almost twice as much in a monthly payment. And so the only way they can dump these properties is to lower the price, which cuts into their profit, or they have to come out of their pocket, make zero profit, but actually pay to get rid of these properties
Wow.
because the majority of them are bringing on expensive debt to build these spec homes and to build these
Hmm.
properties. Um, but when I mentioned I took on a business partner, and that's why I filed bankruptcy, so I wouldn't jeopardize him. We were raising private money for all of our own deals, and we got to a point where we had raised more private money than we had our own deals. And we've also, built up a pretty decent network across the state of Wisconsin by this point, and we had lots of friends that were looking for the money for their deals. So to keep our investors' money active, we started an arbitrage lending company. So pay our investors 9% and we lend it out at 12%. And it was a side gig for a while, and then it grew a little momentum, and before we knew it, it was a full-fledged animal on its own. And so the last 4 or 5 years, we were averaging 20, 25 loans a month. And
Wow.
doing about 25 to 30 million a year in loans. And these are all short-term private loans to house flippers and landlords. And so just the lending business, I was involved in well over 1,000 loans. And on the real estate side, I don't keep track, but I've done hundreds and hundreds of real estate deals. So I've even in the lending space, certainly you don't close every loan that comes in as an application. So that means we're looking at properties with about a 60% closing ratio to applications. So to close 1,000 loans, we looked at 1,600 to 2,000 deals over the years.
That's a
And
lot of deals to look at. Holy cow.
yeah, but it keeps your fingers on the pulse of the market,
Sure.
because when you're lending statewide, I could see what was going on in Madison versus Milwaukee versus Green Bay or Wausau. And what I would definitely track is, the average days it takes to sell a property, not just what it sold for, because it might have sold high, but if it sat on the market for 6 months to get it, that's not interesting to me. I don't want to sit on something 6 months to get top dollar. So that was kind of 2012 through last year. And then my business partner actually bought me out of the lending company here not too long ago.
Oh, nice.
And
Congratulations.
yeah, we had a good run, and the lending business honestly is boring.
Oh,
Um, yeah, I'm
that's
I'm kind
awesome.
of I'm kind of a deal junkie, and those weren't my deals. I'm just lending on them,
All
and
right.
I want to be out doing my own acquisitions and working my own deals and growing generations of wealth platform and things. So so that's really where the knowledge came from. It was just in the trenches, making all the mistakes, trying to learn as many as I could from other people. And I would say that my first half of my career, I was a closet investor, meaning I didn't really build a network. And the second half, I am all about building a network. It's
All right.
it's the people that you communicate with and that you can trust, um, can make or break you.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I'm right there. I agree with you completely. I was listening to another business podcast with a younger guy and younger, like 30s, whatever. Um, to my kid, he'd
Younger,
still be ancient, but whatever.
younger to us for sure.
Yeah, younger to us. And he's interviewing some younger girl in her 30s. And they were talking like, I don't know why people network. Why do they go out and shake hands and meet for coffee or lunch or whatever when you can do all this stuff online? And my first thought was, what kind of a moron am I listening to? Because I've gotten more deals done by chatting with people, meeting them for coffee and lunch and all that kind of stuff. Even sometimes meet them at a bar or whatever. I mean, just the handshaking, you get to know people, and you don't know what kind of network that person has individually. But I do know that when I meet someone in person or over something like this, it's way deeper, definitely in person, way deeper than just throwing up a post on social media and people get their little thumbs up or whatever. It was just
Well,
a bizarre. I'm like, is this a generational thing or what am I missing here?
and that's what I mentioned earlier. People don't know how to actually talk anymore. It's just text and email. And when I'm sitting down at the kitchen table or on the phone, I do the majority of my business over the phone because we do work statewide. So I'm not going to drive 2.5 hours. Since I'm in central Wisconsin, I can be anywhere in the state in 2.5 hours, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to drive 2.5 hours to go look at something that is got a 10% chance of coming together or a 0% chance. So I've gotten very good on the phone. And the biggest, I think, success story for me is when I can get somebody in a 15 to 30 minute conversation to essentially agree to what I'm offering to the point where it's now worth our time to get together. That takes a skill set that the majority of people in our society today don't have. They just don't.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. You're so right. And I'll just give you a really quick example to back that up. I'm trying to sell a motorcycle on I have it on Facebook Marketplace, and it is hilarious
Mm-hmm.
the communication that I get from people. Once you figure out, like, okay, you're not a bot, I think you're human, but you still are having a very hard time speaking like a human. They don't know how to negotiate. They don't know, like I put my phone number in there. Just give me a call.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if they don't know what to ask because this is the first motorcycle they ever bought or first thing they ever bought. It was so bizarre how just, I'm going to dare say socially inept some people are. And you're talking, a few $1,000s here. It's not
Hmm.
pocket change, but it's interesting because I'm like, man, if you like try to get a real estate deal or get a job in a job interview or something like that, and this is how you're talking to that person, you are going to have a rough time, man. Just get a magic marker and a cardboard sign, stand on the corner and hope for the best. Because, oh my gosh, there's just a lack of communication skill. It's bizarre.
100%. And I I do teach a 2-day negotiations training course. So
Oh,
this
nice.
this is really kind of fresh because I just did it a couple weeks ago in Milwaukee, and I had a room full of people, and I asked people, what's your biggest fears? And of course, everybody has different fears, but the majority of them are just the monster under the bed. It doesn't really exist.
Mm,
And they're like, well, I have to call people. What if they answer? And I said, okay, let's look at it this way. Twist your mindset. If you know you have the skills to help somebody and you choose not to call them, you are by default harming that person.
correct.
So if you can shift your mindset around to that, you're selfish to not call them if you truly know that you're ethical and you have the right morals and you can help them. And okay, so that's a little bit of a mind shift for people. And then I say, okay, think about that other person, and your Facebook story is exactly right. That other person probably sat there for minutes, if not hours, agonizing over being nervous to call you. So there's nothing to be scared of. Just
Yeah.
get on the phone or get in person, talk to each other, and solve some problems. Just have a conversation. That's all negotiations are, is a conversation if you do it
Oh
right.
my gosh. Yeah, you nailed it. You
Yeah.
nailed it. So I have a call answering service and I have to reinforce to my crew that you have to understand what happened in that person's mind that's calling us,
Hmm.
whether they're just scheduling a massage, scheduling, I don't know, a spay or neuter for their pet or something like that. Like they had to pick up the phone, which is a rare thing these days.
Hmm.
They had to look online and find a phone number. They probably called 10 other places before they called us because the 9 places before us didn't answer the phone. They finally got someone with a live human that can help them.
Uh-huh.
Like you got to understand that they have gone through somewhat of a tumultuous hell to get you on the phone, but you pick up the phone and you're 1 second in, they're already 15 minutes in.
Yes.
So sometimes they're going to be a little grouchy because they're like, somebody help me, right?
Hmm.
So I give them things to say and do and all that kind of stuff so that the person on the other end of the phone, the actual caller, knows that we can help them. And once we get that point across, then it's easy, smooth. But before then, they're like, oh my gosh, I've been right, just going through. And I had to work them through this whole exercise. I'm like, okay, tell me the last time that you called a service company, landscaper,
Hmm.
anything. And somebody's like, I called a car detailer. All right, was that the first car detailer that you called? Like, no, I think I called 12 of them. Great. What happened to the first 11? They're like, well, one guy called me 3 weeks later and like all this stuff. I'm like, okay, now understand that that's just normal for people anytime they pick up the phone.
Hmm.
So even if they text or email or something like that, like it's tough. So when you're good at communication, you can get stuff done just because you're there.
A
You're
hundred
present.
percent. A
Yeah.
100%. And to piggyback on that, right now, and this is never going to get better, it's only going to get worse, but right now, if you actually have a live person, because I don't answer my phones. Like when somebody's calling in, if they're trying to sell a house, yes, they go to an answering service and it is a live, virtual assistant, and then that person puts them on my calendar. But they're getting a live person, and you are spot on, and clearly you're in the business. Just setting yourself apart and not having a bot or a computer answering your phone makes so much of a difference nowadays.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's
And that's
amazing.
going to get better for people like us and worse for everybody else.
You know what's interesting digging into the AI thing? I had a guy, he he's a software programmer, and I was talking to him about how we could introduce or incorporate, I should say, AI in some of the stuff that we have with our phone system. And he's like, "Why do you need people?" And I was like, "Get that thought out of your head right now. Maybe in 5, 10 years that's going to be a thing, but right now we're not there yet. So just people are going to be part of it, at least in our business, as is right now at this moment. So we need tools to help them do their job faster, smoother, all that jazz, which that's what I'm talking to you for.
Mm-hmm.
But removing them as like, why do you need people? No, 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 no. We're not there yet.
See, and to me, AI, I mean, it's a great tool. It's crazy how quickly it's advancing,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't see AI ever replacing me at the kitchen table negotiation because it can't tell body tone, body language. Somebody's slumping in their chair, somebody's got a little tear beating up in the corner of their eye. AI is never going to do what I can do in
It'll
my
be
mind.
it'll be a long time.
Yeah.
I dare say never. I'm afraid to use that word never.
Yeah, that's
But
true. That's true.
but it's I don't think it's gonna be. We got a while. We
Hmm.
got a while. Presumably, we'll both be long retired by then. But who knows? Who knows? It's tough to say.
Yeah.
Derek, where can people find you?
Well, the Generations of Wealth podcast is my platform. It's actually launching March 14th,
Nice,
and we've got some shows recorded and in the can, so to speak. But thegenerationsofwealth.com is where that can be found, and everything else about me is going to be there as well. My contact information, what we do. You know, I've been doing this investing for 20 years and this type of creative deal structuring and different things that I do for a long, long, long time. And specifically, if you're listening in the state of Wisconsin, anything I can do to help you, I'm an open book. You know, there's no hidden costs, no tricks or gimmicks. I've had people throughout my career that helped me at times, and you know, I look forward to giving that back. So
fair, fair. When you make it to the top, send the elevator back down. Right.
that's right. That's right. Or you know, just jump off and hope your parachute opens.
There's two other questions I want to ask you about.
Mhm.
One, when I think of Wisconsin, I am under the impression, though I have no fact to back this up with, I'm under the impression that there's other states in the country that match this in similarity, where they have one or two cities that are doing really well, like Madison, real estate wise, is
Mhm.
to me, I'm like, how can stuff be this expensive? House
Mhm.
sold in our neighborhood in less than 3 days for at least 150,000 more than I thought it should. You know, you go walking in your neighborhood, and you see a for sale sign, you're like, oh, what are they asking for? Whoa, are you crazy?
Yeah.
And they sold it. They sold it. It was in days, few days. It was bizarre. But then I look at stuff, for example, in Milwaukee. I'm like, bigger city, more, I'm going to dare say opportunity, and it's going for a third.
Hmm.
It's bizarre to me. Even Green Bay, Fox Valley. So, from your point of view, is that common for states to have little pockets where the real estate is just in its own little world? Or
Yeah,
is that just
absolutely.
okay?
It is. And you know, obviously Madison is driven a lot by the medical community, the campus, the college and everything else there. And you know, for me, if I lived in or near Madison, I would be that person that would drive 30 minutes to, you know, Jefferson County or you know, the suburb type of stuff. But a lot of the people that want that midtown lifestyle, I don't know. I don't know why they pay what they pay. I mean, I've
All
been in
right.
this business for 20 years and I still don't fathom why they pay what they pay. Uh, I talk to people from the Midwest all the time, and then I talk to people from the West Coast, East Coast all the time. And, you know, in fact, my good friend moved from Madison and is currently in Orange County, California. And
Okay.
what he just paid for a condo, a beachfront condo, I mean, he could have bought up 4 houses in Madison right now, right?
Sure. Yeah. Orange County. That's yeah, yeah, yeah. You're getting pricey in
But
California.
but I mean, he loves it, and people love to be in Madison, and people love to be in other parts. I love to be in the middle of nowhere with some acreage, and you know, I can do what I want when I want, and that's my heaven. So I stopped trying to figure out why people do stuff anymore, and really just tried solving their problems for them, and meet them at their level. Um, Prejudging anybody doesn't really do you any benefits. And that's actually a lesson I learned from raising money. I mean, over
Mm.
the years, I've raised, I don't know, in excess of $20 million, and a lot of the people I raised money from, if you met them walking down the street, you would have no idea. They don't carry themselves like they're, worth millions or anything else. Um, so prejudging people, if you're in any kind of business, I would really try and steer you away from that, because my greatest friends, my best relationships are typically with people that they don't brag about what they have. You would never know what they have, and they're humble. And those are the
Fair,
people I like to spend time with.
fair. Yeah, I guess I'm curious on the pricing because I guess me personally, I'm into the real estate game a little bit
Hmm.
around here at Madison, and I want to get in more. But when I look at cash flow,
Hmm.
I can't make the numbers work to save my life. And I was talking to a banker friend of mine, and I'm like, "Am I missing something?" And he's like, "Nah." Like,
No.
okay, okay. So it's interesting because I don't have the experience in real estate to say this is
Hmm.
why this little pocket is here. Because I look at Green Bay as an example. I look at Milwaukee. Milwaukee's got tons of commercial stuff. They got university by the lake. There's Summerfest and all that jazz. I feel it's marginally closer to Chicago. Got a decent sized airport. But yeah, stuff is going for way less than Madison. Madison's a cool place. Don't get
Yeah.
me wrong. It's a
Well,
it's a great place, but
you
it's
also have to look at local politics, and
mm,
and not to steer one way or another. I don't have an opinion on it, but if you have tenant landlord laws that are pro tenant versus pro landlord, that's going to affect real estate values. Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee, within the city limits, for a long time, and it may still be this way today, but if you went and bought an inner city house that was already tagged by the city, the moment the ink is dry on the deed, they're going to be on you, and you need to improve that property, and you've got a very short time frame to do it.
oh
So now if you buy a house in the inner part of Milwaukee for 25, 30, 40, $50,000, thinking I'm going to be able to just fix it up a little bit and rent it out and make cash flow, and the city comes in and says, well, you've got $100,000 worth of improvements to do to it, and it's still only worth $100,000, you're upside down. So
oh, got
that
it.
makes it less desirable for people to buy. And we did a lot of lending in Milwaukee, specifically the last 4 years. And I learned the city of Milwaukee, because I had to by default. I was doing all the valuations for all of our loans. So until I ran the comps and decided what that after repair value was going to be, that's what we determined how much we would lend on it. So and then I started spending a lot of time down in Milwaukee, driving neighborhoods, and some of them, you wanted to have a pistol locked and loaded, and some of them you didn't feel that way. But that's what you need to do to learn a market.
Yeah,
And I mean, we lent money to some people that their houses, as they were working on them, got broke into and stripped several times.
yeah.
And copper's gone, utilities, everything stripped. Well, that's going to depress that market.
Hmm.
It's just human nature, right?
Yeah.
Let's go back to Madison. Madison's, for the most part, got a fair amount of rules, and it's designed that way to keep the, dare I say, upper class people happier
Hmm.
with their neighborhoods, and it pushes out. People can't afford to live there. They're going to go to, the suburbs or even further. They're going to drive in.
Oh, it's a very good point. That's a
So
very good
who's
point.
who's making the rules in Madison? Are they making them for the $20,000 a year employee, or are they making them for the $200,000 a year executive?
Sure. Fair. That's totally
Yeah.
fair. That is insightful. I guess I never really thought about that. But I
Hmm.
have I have some buddies that are in construction in Milwaukee, and some of the stories that they tell me, I'm like, where are they? Where is somebody bringing brand new copper to? That's like,
Mhm.
oh, this seems legit.
Oh
Let me
yeah.
give you some cash for that. Bizarre,
Yeah.
bizarre. But I don't know. It's a different world. Last question that I have for you is if someone was interested in getting into the real estate game and they have never been in it, maybe they have a day job, or maybe they're just young and looking for something to do to advance their career, whatever.
Mhm.
Where would you recommend that they start as far as the type of property?
Well, type of property is going to be specific to what you're comfortable with. So single families are easier to get rid of. There's a
Mm,
bigger buyer pool for them. And if you start getting into small multifamilies, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, yeah, it's still fairly easy to get rid of. You start diving into, if your first deal you ever do is a 20 unit or a 50 unit apartment complex and it doesn't work the way you thought it would, you may have a little harder time liquidating that or coming out from under it. So it's fairly common for most to dabble with a house or a duplex and then just kind of grow from there.
gotcha.
But anybody that does want to get started, I would highly recommend just go and find your local real estate investor association group
Hmm.
and start meeting those people. We've got a great network around Wisconsin, and I actually do host one of the locations for the Wisco RIA. So,
Oh, nice.
but there's a location in Wausau and Madison, Green Bay, Appleton, Kenosha, Sheboygan, and Eau Claire. So you can go and just get together with other local house flippers and landlords and start building your network.
Yeah, we had Chris Hake on here from the Madison one.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago. It was pre-pandemic, so that was a while ago.
Yeah, you guys probably didn't learn much from my buddy Chris, but I I just spoke in Madison a couple months ago or
Oh,
February.
nice.
February.
He.
And
So I'm going to ask you another question because he's running down the road and pushing mini warehouses,
yep.
and you mentioned mini warehouses.
hmm
Can you tell us your perspective or opinion or any information you have on those? Good, bad, crazy, psycho? I don't know.
I don't have a lot of experience with them other than what friends of mine have gone through. Your biggest hurdles with them is if people start trying to dump toxic waste in them, dump tires, dump that kind of stuff. Or, one buddy of mine, he had some people trying to live in a unit for a while.
Wow.
And,
Okay.
well, they get evicted from their rental and,
Well,
they
it's a
can rent,
roof.
they can rent a storage unit for $75 a month versus $750 a month. People will do it. So, but the nice thing with them is your evictions you're not evicting people, you're evicting stuff. So it's a
Okay.
different process, but it's quicker and cheaper. I just got a call 2 hours before we recorded this from my attorney. I had to evict somebody, and my eviction costs are almost $2,000 now just to get somebody out. If
Wow.
if I use the attorney. And I can do it myself. I can go to court, I can file my own evictions, but my schedule doesn't allow for it because of how much I travel. If a court date lands when I'm traveling, I don't have that luxury
Right.
anymore. So it's certainly in my opinion, it's easier dealing with stuff than it is dealing with people that live in a property. So
Fair.
I like the storage units. That said, some areas are very overbuilt,
Hmm.
and so it's buyer beware. And then there's a lot of pockets that could still use more units. So,
That's all right. Yeah, I was just in Beloit this morning, and I can't believe how many warehouses I saw or groups of them. All I could
mhm.
think is there must be a lot of boats around here that I don't know. I don't know. There's tons of them. Tons
Yeah,
of warehouses.
I've talked to Chris about it a lot. I mean, he's deep enough into it now where he's starting to figure out what size units are the best to have, what's the most sellable, so to speak.
Hmm.
And it sounds like the 12 by 20s, um, the small units, the little 5 foot wide units, 10 foot wide units, or 10 foot deep units, they're hard to fill.
I bet.
Um,
I bet.
and then the other trick is, and this is what he's doing on his new builds, he's making the center wall removable. So if you've got a 12 by 20, but it's back to back with another 12 by 20, and you can take out that center section, now you've got a 12 by 40.
Wow. Okay.
And so he's doing that now, and people are loving that because
Huh.
for the boats, the campers, the the toys.
Yeah.
And so that's
Well, that's clever.
I would buy them if I got the right deal, but there's a lot of competition at it, and I don't follow the herd. So
Fair. Fair.
yeah.
I love it. Well, Derek, thank you so much for being on the show. You shared a ton of insights. Can you tell us that website one more time?
TheGenerationsOfWealth.com will go live March 14th, and the Generations of Wealth podcast. It's like I said before, it's not just about raising or making money. It's just everything about true wealth, time wealth, physical wealth, spiritual wealth, financial wealth. And we have awesome guests that come on in all different aspects. It's not just real estate investing. So love to have you follow us. There's also Generations of Wealth Facebook group. But join the community. It doesn't cost you anything, and we'd love to have you.
Nice. I love it. This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. We're locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie. If you're listening or watching this on the web, if you could do us a huge favor, keep the algorithm happy, give it the big old thumbs up, subscribe, and of course, share this with all your entrepreneurial friends, especially those that may be interested in getting into the real estate game, fun and profitable and challenging as it may be. My name is James Cademan, and Authentic Business Adventures is brought to you by Calls on Call, offering call answering and receptionist services for service businesses across the country, on the web at callsoncall.com. And of course, the Bold Business Book, a book for the entrepreneur in all of us, available wherever fine books are sold. We'd like to thank you, our wonderful listeners, as well as our guest, Derek Dombeck, the founder of Generations of Wealth Global. Thank you so much, Derek, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. Thank you for listening. We will see you next week. I want you to stay awesome. And if you do nothing else, enjoy your business.